already having failed the first test against Buriram United. The second test, while his team got away with a point, questions continue to persist in how Cisco is actually going to deploy his team. And it was already puzzling from kickoff when, thanks to the enforced suspensions of three key players, Irazabal, Havel and Figueiredo, Cisco, of all things, decided to do something that has never been done previously this season: play a 4-4-2. Yes, the classic 4-4-2. Was Cisco thinking that playing a two-line 4-4-2 was able to keep out the Japanese? Well, it was pretty evident that it backfired almost immediately, as Machida had control for at least 2/3 of the first half before Johor's gradually regained some tempo, some control of the game. So there you have that unusual formation that confused the outfield players. Thanks to the heroics of Malaysia's number one goalkeeper Syihan, Johor Darul Takzim were able to ride out their good fortune as they held Japanese visitors Machida Zelvia to a goalless draw at the AFC Champions League Elite League stage match at the Sultan Ibrahim Stadium earlier tonight. It was his inspired form that played a huge role in the Southern Tigers earning their first point in the 25-26 ACLE League campaign after they lost 1-2 to Buriram United in their opening game earlier this month. And starting in between the posts ahead of their usual first choice goalkeeper for this competition, Syihan was actually playing in his first Asian club competition as a starting goalkeeper since 12th of December 2023, when he was in goal in the Southern Tigers' 5-1 victory over BG Batam United in their final AFC Champions League group match that season. And the choice to start him ahead of Adoni Zubair proved to be inspired. Yes, the second time I used the word inspired, as he made 3 huge saves throughout the game to ensure that the Southern Tigers kept themselves in contention and eventually went away with a point. And he deservedly won the Man of the Match award for his heroics between the posts. And it is fair to say that without his reflexes, positioning and bravery, it is likely that Cisco Muno's men would have suffered a second straight defeat at the highest level of Asian club competition, and that would have put those 28,000 plus in attendance very disappointed, having been looking forward to their first Asian club home match of this season. And here was how Syihan played his part that laid the foundations for Johor's first precious point of the competition. In the 16th minute, he spread himself wide to deny Asashi Masuyama from scoring off a corner at the near post after the outfielders were found to be very hesitant in their decision making, especially in choosing who to mark and close down in this defensive set play routine. If not for the 29-year-old's bravery, it was possible that a goal could have been conceded. And during that first 25 to 30 minutes where the J1 League opponents were very dominant, it was he alone who kept them at bay. Even when he had to face a penalty 3 minutes after that first big save he had to make, after Jonathan Silva conceded a penalty, luck rode on his side as Yuki Soma sent the resulting penalty that rattled against the crossbar and out for safety. In football, it is important that luck play a good part as well, because bravery, excellent performances may count for nothing, especially for goalkeepers, if a goal is conceded. even when it's not his fault. And that luck was as pivotal as his two other big saves later on that that paved the way towards the draw. In the 20th minute, he had to dive low at the near post to keep out a stinging attempt from Henry Mochizuki after the latter managed to cut in from the right and was lurking dangerously on the edge of the box. If Syihan had not had his reflexes on, it was possible that a goal could have been scored. And that fire-up performance from Malaysia's number one goalkeeper showed why he's important for club and country, especially with the recent news that Malaysian football was rocked with the suspension of 7 naturalised players following their 4-0 win over Vietnam in the Asian Cup qualifier in June. So, coming back to Syihan's performance, after Johor regained control for the remainder of the game, though in bits and pieces, Syihan was called upon again big time for the final moment at the hour mark, where he had to dive bravely at the feet of Na Sang Ho to keep out a cross from Yuki Suma and stifle the attempt. Imagine without that bravery, without that lion-hearted performance from Syihan, the 28,000 over fans could be facing with a 1-0 or even a 2-0 defeat against the ACLE debutants, which would have been pretty embarrassing and also further impact their rather poor record against Japanese clubs. So, with those 3 big saves, with his commanding presence in the box, in the defensive third, he deservedly won man of the match. And he alone was able to cover up for the 3 banned players who were unable to play in this fixture as part of the 12-month ban that each of them was imposed. The affected players from the bombshell that FIFA threw at the Football Association of Malaysia and Malaysian football as a whole last Friday. The 3 impacted players were Hector Havel, John Irazabal, and João Figueiredo. And for the players that they missed, it forced Xisco Munoz to rejig his lineup. And in the rejigging of the lineup, in the absence of Irazabal, the usual back 3 defense was initially abandoned, with Eddie Isafilov returning to his libero role that he played with distinction last season in the ACLE alongside Antonio Gauda in the 4-man backline. And though through no fault Isafilov, the entire defense actually struggled to keep pace with the quick passing and especially the transition that Machida quickly turned each time they regained the ball during those turnovers that the home side made. And Irazabal, if he had played, might also have struggled to keep Machida at bay, especially in the first 25 minutes. He would have positioned himself better to keep a few of the moves out. He could have rallied his defenders to play higher up, or even better, perhaps organize the defense in a way that would have frustrated the J1 opponents earlier on. But it's pretty evident that Irazabal might not have made that much of a difference. The impact was more keenly felt for Johor, both in midfield and in attack. In midfield, initially in that 4-4-2 system, which I'll touch on in a different point on Xisco Munoz's baffling decision making again, you got Nacho Mendes and Afiq Faisal, the captain of the evening, playing in the dual center midfield role, and both of them struggled to contain the Japanese opponents, particularly the former, as he kept giving away the ball that resulted in quick turnovers and transitions from defense to attack by the visiting side. Even though much of Machida's attempts to breach Syihan's goal came to naught. But the absence of the calmness, the composure, and the clever movement of Hector Havel was keenly felt, because previously, when Hector was in the team, you can rely on Hector to be the link man between the midfield and the attack. And with his fast free passing play, Hector is able to control the game flow and tempo in a way that Nacho Mendes flopped terribly and eventually had to be substituted out later in the second half. And I think now coming from after midfield, the attack, that's where the impact was most keenly felt. The club top scorer until the ban, João Figueiredo, was sorely missed. Partnering the front two for today, that partnership that he previously had with Bergson was broken, and Bergson had to play with Arif Aiman, who was thrust into an unfamiliar position compared to his usual right wing or right midfielder role that he was more accustomed to. And the result was pretty obvious, because Bergson, instead of staying out more often as the out-and-out striker, he had to drift in more into his own half to collect the ball, to initiate the attacks and movements, where previously it could have been the job of Figueiredo, where Figueiredo, apart from his goal-scoring instincts, it was his ability to provide the assist and movement that was sorely missed, because Figueiredo was not only able to play in the middle, but he was able to play on both wings. And with that ability to play anywhere alongside the front three, Figueiredo keeps defenders guessing where he will go. Even in the game against Buriram, Figueiredo emerged as one of the more dangerous Southern Tigers that the Thai champions had to deal with. But without Figueiredo, Bergson had his limitations, especially in Asia. And when you're up against smarter defenders who are able to organize themselves and who know the real standard of Malaysian football, having done meticulous research in their pre-match preparations, especially in their video analysis, because I do believe the Japanese teams usually, they have had this scouting team that would have watched and recorded some of JDT's previous games, whether it's in the Sultan Ibrahim stadiums or in other grounds, in order to configure out what JDT were up to and how JDT would play. So even with the three missing players, the Machida would have figured out what the other players were capable of doing. That included Bergson. Bergson is always a dynamic, fast-forward, quick-thinking striker, but there is also a level that he has hit as well, because Bergson was forced more deep to play in the deeper role, while Arif was slightly lost in his initial position as the support striker, and that prevented Johor from being more effective in utilizing their home advantage and to create more spaces that could have unnerved the Machida defense and perhaps even put a sterner test to their national team goalkeeper Kosei Tani. Moving on, as I've already mentioned in the previous videos, Cisco Munoz' real test would come in the ACLE. That's where Johor will be up against some of the strongest teams in East Asia, never mind West Asia, the western half of the huge continent. And already having failed the first test against Buriram United, the second test, while his team got away with a point, questions continue to persist in how Cisco is actually going to deploy his team. And it was already puzzling from kickoff when, thanks to the enforced suspensions of three key players, Irazabal, Havel, and Figueiredo, Cisco, of all things, decided to do something that has never been done previously this season: play a 4-4-2. Yes, the classic 4-4-2. Was Cisco thinking that playing a two-line 4-4-2 was able to keep out the Japanese? Well, it was pretty evident that it backfired almost immediately as Machida had control for at least two-thirds of the first half before Johor gradually regained some tempo, some control of the game. So there you have that unusual formation that confused the outfield players. They were so confused that, as I mentioned earlier, Nacho Mendes ended up making the most turnovers in possession in the middle of the park. And you got your defenders, especially your fullbacks, Oscar Arbas initially on the left and also Raul Para on the right. What looked like an initial like maybe three centre back and one real fullback became a very confusing formation, and you got Jonathan Silva, who usually would play at left back but has been deployed more at left midfield, who looked more anonymous, and that has been unfortunately that feature that the two-cap Argentine international had. He was so anonymous that he was also deservedly subbed out alongside Mendes. And not only was the formation very confusing, even the substitutions, once again, yes, the substitutions that the former Watford and Sheffield Wednesday coach had made left people scratching their heads. It's like he only made 3 substitutions against Machida Selvia. Jairo, Teto Martin, and Nacho Insa coming on. And in the final moments of the game, when it was pretty evident that Machida were more than willing to sit back and go only for the counter when necessary, Johor were already having problems trying to unlock the Japanese puzzle, where they could not even ask a question on the Machida defensive setup. And there you have Lavelle, Corbin Ong and Nazmi Faiz among the other subs who were not even trusted to come on. It's like Corbin Ong with his direct running down the left with the crossing to relieve the burden of it was pretty obvious that the Johor defenders late in the game were trying to play all the direct passes to Arif Aiman down the right when they were reverted back to 3-5-2 midway in the second half. But what I've noticed in the game was Yuki Soba, as forward, was able to intercept many of those direct passes that were intended for Arif. That would have been quite damning because it's pretty clear that Machida really did their homework on Arif and company, which I will touch on in the final point. And to make matters worse, only Teto Martin, one of the 3 subs that came on, was the only one who came closest to testing Kositani. Yes, Johor had many shots, but many of the shots, especially in the second half and in the final stages of the game, they went straight to Kose. It's like the Japanese the Japan national team second choice goalkeeper had not much, didn't have to break much sweat to catch those attempts, apart from having to react to Teto Martin's drive that went just wide and having to dive low to keep out Akizete shots in the second half. There was nothing much Tani had to do. This was pretty damning. It's like for all the wealth and all that talent and all that expertise that you have brought, that they have signed to play for the Southern Tigers, and all they could do was to shoot tamely at one of Japan's national team goalkeepers. Pretty embarrassing, isn't it? And what is more damning is, while you got Jairo, he did have a few shots at goal, but the lack of flexibility, the lack of adjustments, and the unwillingness to unleash players who could still make a difference sums up the level of trust Xisco Munoz has with some players. He trusted some of the imports a lot more, including Jonathan Silva, when they were not as deserving of that level of attention and minutes compared to your likes of Corbin Ong, Nazmi Faiz, who were strangely stalwarts for the national team but often this season left on the fringes of JDT at club matches alongside Matthew Davies was not even used at all, and a few other stalwarts who have served the Malaysian champions well in the past. So yes, big questions. Is Xisco Munoz really at the head coach that JDT deserve to bring them into the knockout rounds of the ACLE? From those two unsatisfactory results, it is pretty clear that Xisco is clearly not the man. Yes, he had the reputation, he had guided Watford in the Premier League after leading them to promotion, but the record in the ACLE sounded more like his term at Sheffield Wednesday. And that is pretty damning because the quality of the players that he has at his disposal should have reflected in a better showing, especially when they were playing at home tonight. But it wasn't the case. Once again, you see a indecisive Xisco who rolled out his luck thanks to Syihan. Without Syihan, game over. And finally, like it or not, it's clear Machida did their tactical homework a lot better than Johor's. I'm not sure whether JDT had done their homework on Machida, which their data analysis team should have. But it's pretty clear that, as with Japanese football work ethics, Machida are taking this ACLE seriously. And among the players that they have observed, they definitely will have observed Arif Aiman, who was recently nominated as one of the 3 candidates for the AFC Asian Men's Player of the Year for the awards night that will be held in Saudi Arabia in October or November. So it's pretty clear that Machida had identified Arif Aiman as one of the danger men, and for the large part they quietly kept Arif in check. Arif was unable to play his usual devastating self, and whenever he had the ball, you can see at least 1 or 2 closing in down on him. And even when he had the ball delivered, it wasn't with the same precision or confidence that he usually had in many of the matches that he has played. And better still, as I mentioned, those passes that were aimed at Arif late in the game, you had a forward who was able to intercept those passes even though Yuki Soba was shorter than Arif. Pretty damning. It's like Machida had Johor all figured out. Johor did not have Machida figured out. So once again, who should be held responsible for this rather unsatisfactory draw that could easily have been yet another game lost in the ACLE? It could have been Xisco, his coaching staff, the scouting staff. They should have been held responsible because they are not at the level of professionalism that the Japanese opponents were. And if not for Syihan, imagine an embarrassing home defeat that would have wiped the cheers of the 28,000 plus in attendance tonight.